Alrighty.
Everybody up this morning sleeping?
Oh no. Seems like it. I always have trouble. And I always tell students, like when I have them in the beginning of the year, seniors always want to be like, oh man, I'm 18, I can sign out, or I'm I'm almost out of school, I don't need this, like I can not show up for a few days. Man, save those for the beginning of the second semester when it's
Right.
cold and nasty outside and like you just don't want to go. Those are the days. That's where you save it. Yep.
And
Yep.
that's one I've always used. Like the Google Classroom is not new. I've been using it for past, I guess this is the third year.
Yeah.
Because especially my ECE students, after they got their credits done and all they got to do is really take English and maybe one other subject. They barely ever come to class. So I was always like, well, shoot, I'm going to set it up like my college classes.
Yep.
On a Google Classroom. And hey, if you get it, you get it done, That's why anybody who's ever had me, this Google Classroom is nothing new for us.
Oh yeah. We didn't have Google Classroom, but we had a different like learning management system. Yeah. And so we used that. And so I've always been used to this. I love it.
All right, once they popped this thing open, I was like, oh, okay.
Let's go.
Yeah. I started getting kids that they would turn in work at 11 o'clock at night, midnight, just like I'm now,
Yep.
They're on leisure.
Fine with me.
I take it.
Oh, yeah. Alrighty, guys. So let's look at this. Yesterday, we determined that the play was performed at the Morosco Theater. And what we're going to look at first today is a little bit about this Morosco Theater because it has some cool history. So we are going to be clicking over into this website. This is the New York Preservation Archive Project. So this is a group that wants to preserve all of the history of New York, right? And so they're doing their best to keep collections up of like different buildings that have gone away, things like that, to where we can look at them. So this article is about the Helen Hayes and the Morosco Theater. And these two theaters were demolished during a redevelopment of the theater district, which of course would be like Broadway and surrounding areas for theater in there, sparking a movement to preserve the cultural and architectural legacy of that area. So this one is in like West 46th Street and West 45th Street, New York. So this wasn't like right off of Broadway, but these were ones that would have been used for like off-Broadway shows, and shows that were like kind of getting tested to see if they needed to go on to Broadway or if they could go on to Broadway. So we're going to read two sections of this, and I'm making sure I get it right. Designation status, / current status, and key dates and preservation history. We're going to read that real quick. Here we go. And these are pretty short. Like it wasn't something that I wanted it to be like really long for you guys to read. So I'm going to start with reading this current status section. The Helen Hayes and Morosco's theaters, along with Bijou, Astor, and Gaiety theaters, were victims of the Great Theater Massacre of 1982, in which several historic theaters were demolished to make way for the 50-story Marriott Marquis Hotel. In 1978, prior to the demolition of the theaters, the sites were designated as eligible for the National Register of the Historic Places. So just a little bit before these places were destroyed, they were like eligible for National Historic Places. And then they busted them down for a hotel, a Marriott hotel, which obviously, yeah, like tourism's high in New York, right? But part of the reason is because of theater and all these new things that are up there. So I know when I went to New York, I got to see a lot of theater while I was up there. I was there for a theater conference. I better go see theater. But it was something that that was why a lot of people were there. Theaters were packed every night. It was wild. So some key dates in this history, right? So all of these dates, if you remember yesterday, we looked at the New York Times article about when the performance was done for the Death of a Salesman show. That was 1949. So this doesn't start until 1973 here, because that's when they announced plans for the sprawling modernist hotel complex in the heart of Times Square, but support for the development lags as the economy falters. So the economy was going like this, kind of like it is now. And so people were like, yeah, maybe we don't need those hotels right now. Maybe we can do something else. So in 78, Mayor Ed Koch's administration lures Portman back to New York in an attempt to cleanse Times Square of its decadent reputation, meaning that it had a reputation for just like all being ritzy, this decadent, super sweet, that type of thing. They needed something to come in that wasn't as rich. They needed something that may draw people to be able to do that. And of course, Marriott hotels are cheaper. They're not like big old luxury hotels. So those could help out. December 26th, 1978, the Helen Hayes and Morocco theaters are deemed eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. But on March 22nd, 1982, demolition commenced on them. So on the 23rd of 1982, the next day, actors such as Richard Gere, Tammy Grimes, Michael Moriarty, and Treat Williams are arrested for obstruction of demolition. These guys go out and they protest, just the same as we've all been doing. These guys go out and they protest, and they're like, nah, fam, don't take down our theaters. These guys are historic. Don't take them down. And they get arrested. And on the 27th of 82, demolition of the Helen Hayes Theater briefly halts to comply with a mandate to preserve objects of historic and architectural interest. So they stop just for a bit, and then they decide, oh, this mandate to preserve objects of historic and architectural interest, meh, we'll go on. So June 9th, 1982, 2/3 of the front facade, so the front, like half of the building of the Helen Hayes Theater, collapses into the street because they're not fully done with demolishing it. So it just dead up falls into the street. August 7th of 1985, Neil Simon, Virginia, and Ambassador Theaters designated as New York City landmarks. A bunch of more theaters were designated as landmarks, but not them. And then on September 4th, 1985, the Marriott Marquis Hotel opens its doors. And this was what the Morosco kind of looked like. This was where it was. And then it was just gone, which was very, very sad. So that's kind of the timeline of what happened, okay? This down here, the preservation history, is a more written out version of what happened. But that's just the timeline. Here's the building once it was being demolished. And if you can't tell, obviously it was other things all around it that were getting demolished. I love the Toshiba building in the background. That's cool. That's old. You don't see Toshiba buildings anymore. But that was kind of just what it looked like, and where it was being performed. So this big show, all of these epic shows that happened there were just gone, just like that, which was kind of sad. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do, in your own words, what is the history and importance of the Morosco Theater? Like, obviously, this theater is gone, but there were like protests to save it, and it took them forever to demolish it because these things kept happening. So, why was there a fight to save this? Like, what was the big deal about this one theater? And if you guys that are in the class want to uh, throw a potential answer into the chat for it, we can talk about it. I'm thinking that's fine. Because you got to think, it's kind of like how earlier this year, like we had Mr. Kaufman and a principal and other people get arrested, risking their jobs for the Black Lives Matter protests. And these guys did the same thing. These actors back in the 80s did the same exact thing, risked their reputation, risked their jobs, risked everything to go out and protest in front of this Morosco Theater as it was starting to get demolished. Why might they do that?
What you think about that department meeting yesterday?
Smile. That's all I have to say about that. So
I was working and listening to it in the background.
Yep.
They try to sucker me into that program that one lady does, Abilene or whatever her name, Jenna.
Yeah. No, thank you. So, if anybody, I'm curious, anyone here, are you thinking, it's just a theater? Like, be honest, if you're thinking that. Anybody just like, well, it's just another theater?
I was actually looking it up to see if Donald Trump had anything to do with it because he was a huge real estate investor in the early '80s in New York.
That's true. I didn't even think about that.
And he had a little bit. He didn't have directly to do with them, but he did bump heads. Turn that down, please. He did bump heads with those developers. I mean, the protesters at the time I was reading while he was doing his Trump Towers.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. Oh my God. That's a whole nother level, you know?
Right. That's when I heard, development, and I was just, as you just said, that's my mind is when you said, how many of you guys just think it's a theater and it's just nothing? I mean, it's okay to think that way if you're, money hungry and you're a developer and you don't care because you see that piece of land as you're going to put in something new and we're getting away with the old, we're making it new. It wasn't worth it. You've got those kind of people, and then you've got the people that are like, oh, it's historic. We'll never be able to build this again. Look at this history. It gives us something to go back on and and learn from. So those are the two arguments, kiddos.
Yeah, get it, Martinez. Yeah, and Ari, you're talking about the news, plays, radio. That's a lot of ways that people got information too. Absolutely. Plays were like the ultimate form of social protest for a long time, and they still are. I don't know if you guys have heard about like Beetlejuice and Hadestown, like all of these ones that were on stage in New York before everything shut down due to COVID. A lot of those were like dead up social protests in their own right. Beetlejuice had a few lines in it that were just ultimate social protests. They were great. Hadestown in and of itself, it had a song called "We Built the Wall," and very much an allusion to Donald Trump's wall situation. And it was
Hamilton's huge one.
Hamilton.
I mean, they don't get any more relevant or bigger than that right now.
No, it doesn't.
It's on Disney Plus. If you don't see, if we were in class, we would have popped that baby in for the next 3 days.
Let me tell you. And I could tell you so much about it because it's my baby. But there's so much history in the theater that was there, and there were a lot of things that were done there. And so demolishing that for just a hotel, like if it would have been maybe something like we were expanding Rockefeller Plaza or like things like that could have like tacked on to that history, I think a lot of people would have been more okay with it. But it was a hotel, you know.
This goes on in a lot of cities across America. It goes in a lot of cities across the world, really. Especially as the turn of the century happened in 2000s, and you got the old school dying away that it really mattered to them, and to new school really. Does the Morocco really matter to us right now? You know what I mean? So that kind of deal.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for historians, if it wasn't for people keeping these things alive, you know what I mean? So that's the importance of it. Like you would never know that this stuff happened if we don't keep it alive.
Yep. And like, I'll be honest, am I a person that's like, bring back the Morocco? No, absolutely not. Like it doesn't fully matter to me, but the premise of it does. So like, because I imagine now there's going to be a day and age where they try and take down the theater where Hamilton was performed in and debuted in, right? There's going to be a point where that happens. And everybody that's like my age is going to be like, excuse me? No. It's going to be a whole big movement. So it's something that's just super, super interesting about how history kind of works. Also, that's my favorite way to learn history is by things like that instead of just like read a textbook. Okay, so that's the hardest part of today, guys. That was the hard part. We just made it through the hard part, especially if you were writing out your summary of the history and importance right there while we were talking. That was awesome. So now we're going to get into some nitty gritty about the book. And we're actually going to get you guys set up just to know a little bit more information about this novel. So we're going to find first the setting of the production. So I am not a person that looks at SparkNotes and is like, boo, SparkNotes. No, SparkNotes is great, guys. SparkNotes is a solid resource. Now, if you just copy and paste from SparkNotes, that's plagiarism, and I'm going to kick your butt. But if you use it to help yourself understand a text, that's an awesome skill. That's a very valid skill. So here's SparkNotes. We're using SparkNotes today. And we're going to find the setting of the play. So we already determined, just by looking at other things, it was a play. It says that it's a tragedy. Language is in English. Time and place written. It was written in 6 weeks in a shed in Connecticut. Okay. Date of first publication was 1949, which we already knew. So now we just need to find where the setting was. Aha! So setting, time. Today, that is the present, either the late 1940s or the time period in which the play is being produced. So that's something that a lot of people do is they'll make it very modern. So like I could totally set this play in 2021 and it would be fine. Trust me. But for them, they just mean today. And all of the action takes place during a 24-hour period between Monday night and Tuesday night, except for the Requiem, which takes place a few days later. And then the setting for the place is, it says Willy Loman's house and yard in Brooklyn. So Brooklyn, New York. and various places where he visits in New York and Boston. Boom. Easy. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. Thank you, SparkNotes.
What was the time again?
What was the time? Today. Like the present. Whatever the present happens to be for the reader, because of course when it came out it was the present of 1949, but it's something that can be applied anywhere, which is really cool.
You're right too on your comment there, Ariana. I just saw that there when we were talking about losing the theater.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, back in the day, you had theaters, and the equivalent, especially those times, the equivalent of like the modern day memes were posters. You know, they put up posters everywhere, and
Yeah.
whatever the propaganda was going on, it's the equivalent. And of course, you had uneducated people getting educated by posters or propaganda, kind of like today. You know, somebody uneducated doesn't know any better, opens up a meme and thinks, "Oh, well, this is true," and they go off that kind of stuff and they make decisions off of that. It's the same deal that we had, early 1900s. Nothing changed there.
Yep. So our last question is a little bit open. So part of what we're going to do is we are going to pick a character, and everybody's going to pick whichever character they want out of this group to pay particular attention to during the reading, okay? So you're going to pick one that you think sounds interesting to you to be able to just like really watch as we read and watch what they do and what they say. We're going to use those characters later. Now, you can change your character. So don't think that this is like locking in your character forever and a day. But for now, we're going to choose one to just kind of start with. And then if you decide that you want to change, you can always change. Okay. So the 4 major characters are Linda, Willie, Biff, and Happy. Those are kind of our like majors. There's other major characters, but these are like our 4 like major groups of the family, people in the family. So we're using SparkNotes again. And I want you to choose one of those 4 that you think sounds interesting to you. So first of all, we've got Willie. He's an insecure, self-deluded traveling salesman. Willie believes wholeheartedly in the American dream of easy success and wealth, but he never achieves it. Nor do his sons fulfill his hope that they will succeed where he has failed. When Willie's illusions begin to fail under the pressing realities of his life, his mental health begins to unravel. The overwhelming tensions caused by the disparity, as well as those caused by the societal imperatives being like social pressures, that drive Willie, form the essential conflict of Death of a Salesman. So that's Willie. He's kind of like the dad. Not kind of like, he is the dad of the family. And is the salesman, so to speak. Then we've got Biff. A lot of my sports boys like Biff because he's a sports boy. He likes football. And I think baseball too, but like football is the big one. Willie's 34-year-old elder son. He's the oldest. Biff led a charmed life in high school as a football star with scholarship prospects, good male friends, and fawning female admirers. He failed math, however, and did not have enough credits to graduate. Since then, his kleptomania has gotten him fired from every job that he has ever held. Biff represents Willie's vulnerable, poetic, tragic side. He cannot ignore his instincts, which tell him to abandon Willie's paralyzing dreams and move out west to work with his hands. He ultimately fails to reconcile his life with Willie's expectations of him.
You guys know what a klepto is? Anyone? No. He likes to steal a lot.
Yep.
He likes to steal stuff. People who like to steal are called klepto. What are they called?
Kleptomaniacs.
Yeah, so he's like to steal. So he was stealing at every job that he worked at.
Yep. And we'll look at like what the causes of that kleptomania and stuff like that are too, because it's really, really interesting. We can figure out why he likes to steal so much in the book, which is kind of cool. So then we got Linda. A lot of my girls like to look at Linda. And honestly, if I were in this position, I too would probably end up watching Linda. I like Linda's character. And that's Willie's loyal and loving wife. She suffers through Willie's grandiose dreams, which means like big dreams, like epic dreams that probably will never happen, and self delusions. Occasionally, she seems to be taken in by Willie's self deluded hopes for future glory and success, but at other times, she seems far more realistic and less fragile than her husband. She has nurtured the family through all of Willie's misguided attempts at success, and her emotional strength and perseverance support Willie until his collapse. She's a strong lady. And man, she speaks up too. We really get to experience her speaking up and just being a general badass, like in this story, which is awesome. And then the last one is Happy. Happy is the younger brother. Willie's 32-year-old younger son. Happy has lived in Biff's shadow all his life, but he compensates by nurturing his relentless sex drive and professional ambition. Happy represents Willie's sense of self-importance, ambition, and blind service to societal expectations. Although he works as an assistant to an assistant buyer in a department store, Happy presents himself as supremely important. So he's an assistant to an assistant, but he thinks he's just the top of the line. Additionally, he practices bad business ethics and sleeps with the girlfriends of his superiors. Yeah, because that's a great idea. Hey, my boss has this girlfriend. I'm going to sleep with her. That seems great. Great idea. Happy's not our smartest bulb, okay? But there's also reasons for that. And again, we can kind of find those in the book. So it's very interesting. So totally up to you. Which one sounds the most interesting to you to be able to follow? No matter what, you're going to get some cool information. But which character sounds the most interesting to you right now? Linda, Willie, Biff, or Happy? And once you figure that out, you are done. So you just get that sucker turned right in and we'll be good to go. We will have a little bit of a reflection question for Friday. It's not going to be anything big. Just a little bit of a reflection question. And that'll be it for this week. And then next week, we kind of get to start diving into this book, which I'm very excited for. I don't think it's going to take us too long either because it's a play. So plays are meant to be like movie length, 2.5 hours-ish. And that's what this one is. So it's not too long, which is great. But yeah, that's where we're at. When you guys get this stuff turned in, y'all rock. I love and appreciate you. Thank you all for being awesome.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. For a gross, gray, cold morning where we're all tired.
Right.